Right. Okay. So I see somebody called Marcel just arrived. Um, who's that? Can you identify yourself? I don't have a Marcel on the register. Marcel, can you identify yourself? Please. Nope. I think I vaguely remember seeing that name last one of the other classes. Anybody remembers who that was? People absent Friday. Sparkle. I think it was Sparkle. Sure. All right, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so the recording started. So today, what we want to do is we want to get going with chapter 3 of the text. And chapter 3, I'm going to share my screen here. Chapter 3. All right, is everybody seeing this clearly? You know, guys, some feedback will be a good thing.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, I'm so bored of that fight. All right. So so chapter 3 is going to look at the relational leadership model in a fair amount of detail here to be able to start to look at what the model encompasses, what's expecting of you. So as it says here, the chapter is going to present the relational leadership model as a consideration for you in terms of developing your own personal leadership philosophy. So let's remind ourselves of some of the base information that we've already concerned ourselves with or gone over. That the model is focused on the concept that leadership has to do with the relationship and the relationships, I should say, that a leader develops with the people with whom he interacts, what we could call followers and followership. And therefore, it is not an individual type of activity, but more of a communal process. Leadership is always dependent upon the context, but the context is defined by the relationships that we value. So if you think about all of the types of communities that you engage with, let's say within your home, within work, within school, if you look at the way in which things are done, it is highly dependent upon the the quality of the relationships that we have. Okay, here comes Marcel again. Hi, Marcel.
Hi, sir. I wasn't hearing you before, so I left and come back in.
All right, so who are you? Marcel?
Yes, sir. Sparkle Joseph.
Right, I thought as much, but your name is not coming up like that. All right, welcome aboard. All right, so as I said before, so if you think about the quality of relationships that you have, it sort of becomes the hallmark of the the experience that you have in those particular things. So, for example, if you're having a rough relationships with work, then what you're going to find is that you're not going to be encouraged to go to work and engage with people at the workplace. Similarly, when things go awry at home and in your family environment, you'd find that you want to kind of avoid that because the the as it's saying here, the nature of the relationships determine how we interact with each other, and therefore, if we're having acrimonious type of activities take place, then there's a high likelihood that the nature of the relationship will be negatively or positively affected by the quality of that relationship that you've developed with people in that context. And I'm hoping that you can see this working or see this through your own personal relationships, if not in multiple places, but at least at home and at work, if you do work, and in any sort of social environment that you engage in. So we widen this concept to think about any position in which you take leadership positions, or you're in a followership type of relationship in a different organization. Those are the kind of things I want you to be making comparisons to. All right, so the definition for leadership, the relational leadership model, remember, is leadership as a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. So again, we have the definition that we want to work with, and that we're going to be paying attention to. So the model focuses on 5 primary concepts. It is purposeful and builds commitment towards positive purposes that are inclusive of people and diverse points of view, empowers those who are involved, is ethical, and recognizes that all 4 of these elements are accomplished by being process oriented. So that all of those things are put together in this particular image that comes from the text. So process is involved with anything. At the center, you have your purpose, empowerment and inclusiveness in an ethical subset, well, an ethical climate is what the entire relational model is going to be depending on. So we're going to be examining the various aspects of this this model and looking at how we feel about it in terms of us utilizing elements or all of this model in our own philosophical development of leadership and our practice of leadership moving forward. All right, so the model does not seek to describe the way we see leadership now, but it gives us a sort of ideal against which we can look at and kind of gauge where we could be going as a particular destination for us to get to. So it's proposed in developing and supporting a healthy and ethical, effective groups and effective leadership based on that. It's a framework connecting the 5 key elements that we talked about before and can serve as a responsive approach to leadership. So if you're already in leadership positions, be it within your family, maybe this would help to, or in your workplace, maybe what this can do is assist you in developing or making some changes in the way in which you go about practicing your leadership activities, so that you can start to bring to bear some of the suggestions coming from this model in your own daily practice, be it within the family, within work situations, or even as a follower. You can try to encourage your leader to start to, um, develop some of these aspirations. Maybe even share the text with them. Who knows? That might be a useful thing. All right, so first thing we want to look at is purpose. So purpose influences the components of being inclusive, empowering, and ethical. It includes others, empowers them to use their leadership and talents, is ethical in that it benefits others and improves the quality of life. How that purpose is achieved is just as important as the outcome. It is vision driven and not position driven. So what does this mean? So the purpose of any organization is the focal point of the activities that you're getting together for. So if you think about what you're getting together with people to do, so for example, this class, our focus here is to examine and learn about this particular relational leadership model, and look at how we're going to be able to share that information with each other, um, include everybody's position and thinking about it, empowering individuals in relation to it, and doing so in an ethical climate where we don't create uncomfortableness for the people. Now, purpose, how organizations work is either going to be vision driven or positionally driven. So basically what that simply means is this: most organizations have vision and mission statements. Those vision and mission statements ought to drive the actions and activities of the organization. However, in a lot of instances, people who sit in leadership positions tend to supersede what the vision of the organization is and put their own what's the word I want to go to? Their own pressure on things, and it becomes about what they want and not what the vision of the organization is. And that's a challenge that we're going to have to deal with, and we must recognize that issue when it comes up. But before we go further with purpose, we will look in a lot more details in other presentations where we talk about purpose and goals and mission and objectives. So we'll see those things. But this one of the things that we have to remember, that in this model, the model is striving to speak to us about vision-driven organizations and not position-driven organizations. In fact, it tries to discourage that type of thinking across the board. Now, individuals in the leadership process need to know themselves. So we talk about this from the knowing, being, doing model that we met before. So we talked about this before. So anybody who's getting into a leadership position needs to know who they are, what they think, what are their principles, what are their, what they stand for. Because for you to be able to lead people, you really have to be comfortable with understanding who you are. But that understanding is not going to be something that's static. It's something that will effectively change over time as we grow and develop and we begin to understand more. So the process that we're starting to talk about begins with this process of the knowing, the being aware of self and others, and acting upon that information in terms of moving forward in terms of our things. So these the process knowing, being, doing is circular in nature, in that what it does, as we learn more about ourselves and others and how we perceive others, it should impact upon our actions. That's the doing element. And those actions will bring forth deeper understanding of who we are and how people relate to us. And as we make changes or adjustments in those things about ourselves, begin to understand more, and therefore it tends to have a kind of circular influence, especially if we spend the time to reflect upon what took place in the past and engage in some sort of activities in relation to that to understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. So the knowing, being, doing actions, or what we spoke about before, process, is one in which we start the process in the leadership model that we're looking at here. That knowing, being, doing is something that is going to be important for us to look at. It's compared to the phrase head, heart, and practice. So Palmer, when he looked at this, related this to teaching. So if any of you all have been in any teaching positions before or have acted as a teacher, what they're talking about here is the need for us to act from a position of logic, but not only from logic, we also have to think about, from an emotional standpoint, how what we're doing is impacting upon people, and those head and heart basically affecting what we do. So it's the same thing that we were talking about with the knowing, being, doing. It's a similar comparison that this person speaks about, because if you've ever come across teachers in your past, and I'm asking you all to kind of think about it. Um, if you have somebody who's trying to teach you, who's trying to be, let's say, separate how they feel from what they're doing, you try to you might find a very awkward circumstance that you're facing. Um, if you separate your knowledge base from your feeling base, it leads for very stunted type of activities. Now it's very being human, it's very difficult for us to do things like that, right? Because we always tend to be guided by emotions. But sometimes what we have to do is to find that balance between how we feel and what we know and bring that into the practice. But in order to be effective as a teacher in particular, I've always found the need to bring to bear how people feel and my empathy for people into the things that I know and try to bring learning into that environment. Now, this is especially true for subject material that is challenging for students. So for those of you who have challenges with mathematics, for example, you'd find that if you ever came across a lecturer who comes up or comes out as being very logic driven and don't seem to, care about you, that's in essence, or care about their students, then you're going to have a very hard time with the way in which that person conducts their work and conducts their class. Have any of you all come across the unfortunate circumstance of meeting what I tend to refer to as like a heartless teacher, somebody who just doesn't care about you? No, you never. You all have been really fortunate. Naomi?
So but in secondary school, like they would say, I don't have to be here at the end of the day. I don't get paid already. So regardless of if you learn or not, it
Oh,
doesn't matter.
yes, that's a kind of heartless type of treatment. How did you feel in a class like that?
Oh, I wasn't in her class. Thank God. She was actually telling somebody else, one of her students that. I was fortunate enough to have caring teachers.
All right, but how did the your friend from the other class, what was the response like from them?
They just woke up. I don't think they cared. Because where I went to school is like, if it is the teachers didn't really care, the students didn't care either, which was sad.
No, it's a protective mechanism. If let's say you're in a relationship and you love this person and the other person does not love you, the protective mechanism is to default yourself to taking that love back and protecting yourself. So the same situation will take place in a class environment. If somebody says openly to you, "I really don't care about you, or I don't get paid," then the students themselves will take back and respond by saying, "Well, we don't really care about the work that you do, and we don't care," because there's it's a protective stance that any individual take to help to protect themselves from being hurt. That makes sense.
Yes, sir.
Some of you all are psych students. Have you come across that type of treatment? I'm trying to remember that. I know I have one class with a lot of psych people in it. Psych and source. Any psych and source individuals here? No? Or unwilling to speak? Janet?
So no, I'm in environmental health. I did do psych and soc, but just
Right.
as
As that.
co-curriculums.
Right. But how do you feel about that process? Do you see that as a normal reaction for individuals who are hurt by others, that they would just step back and try to protect themselves and close themselves off?
So yes, I see it as that, but for me, I don't let that deter me because I am on a mission. So I
I
will,
understand,
yeah.
but it doesn't make your experience a good one, does it?
No, it's not. Actually, it shuts, in my opinion, it will shut the individual down because they're feeling like if you can't even respond, go to the teacher, ask a question, this kind of thing, you will be shunned away. So it's
Yep.
not a good place to be.
It's excellent. Very good. That's what I'm trying to talk about. So the same knowing, being, doing thing and the head, heart, and practice is a similar type of thing. If you're a leader and you don't have the knowledge, the emotional strength to deal with people and being open and inclusive and stuff, it will definitely negatively impact upon the type of relationships that you'll develop because of the way you go about doing things. so that the Palmer speaks about the need to synthesize these three components in all leadership not just
So I
in
just want
teaching.
to say one thing. In
Yep.
my life at Costa, there I encountered something like that. But a lot of students will this teacher they saw the teacher as a negative person, and
Uh-huh.
they reacted to that individual characteristics, and
Okay.
some of them really weren't learning in the class. But I as I told them, I refuse to fail, and not because that individual is like that, I'm going to let them make me fail my course. So I was very persistent in the class,
Yeah.
and I a lot of students would not take a class with that individual. I refuse to not take a class because I am on a mission, as I said, and
Right.
I will take the classes, and I pass all the classes.
Well,
So
was
it
it
all
that
depends on
what,
again.
but you see again, although you went to the classes, but was it that you had no choice when it came to the classes, that you had to take this particular lecture?
If well, for me, if once the class is being given on a semester, especially if it's a major course, I would take it. I would not wait until in following year or following semester. I think that's wasting time. And
Right.
I decided I would not let any individual deter me. In my
Right.
opinion, I find the person was teaching, but people, I don't know, everybody have their own opinions, and it was the majority of the people in the program who did not want to be in that individual class.
Well, you've
It
had
was
that
really
because
sad.
one of the things that can cause that in particular to take place is that the teaching preferences of that lecturer don't match the majority of people's learning preferences. And if the
Yes, I
teacher is
agree, sir.
unwilling, yeah, if the teacher is unwilling to adjust their teaching preferences to meet some of the learning preferences, because I
But
mean, I
what?
know you've done that VOC
So
system.
what I did, I pointed it out in an individual, about
Uh,
the teaching style, because yeah, we were having a hard time, and the person actually changed it around.
oh, that's good. At least they're
Yeah, they
open to
changed it
suggestions.
around. Yeah,
It's just,
I
it's
spoke
just that
to them.
okay, but that's good. And then maybe you should have indicated to others that the person is not as bad as it. But
But
anyway,
they say I'm the only person who like that teacher, but nobody wants to have anything to do with that teacher, no matter what I say.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
past experience is something that will guide your current behavior. So, and unfortunately, in the college, we have such a very small environment that a lot of teachers end up getting negative reviews, but the reviews are not officially put into the system, right? What ends up happening is you have a sort of informal ring. Hey, who you get for this, and who's a good teacher for that, and you'll
Yes.
trade information with each other. We're aware of it. I mean, it used to happen when we were in school as well. Who you have for this, and if you
I
had a
did
choice.
several courses with that individual and passed all. I can't be bothered. That I'm not about that. I'm on a mission.
Right, but
Yeah.
understand the quality of the relationship that you could have had with somebody who was less of um who might have been slightly better in terms of meeting your styles. Think
Yeah.
about the nature of the experience that you had, and the quality of learning that might take place in an environment that encourages learning, encourages
Hmm.
mistakes, and learning from practice. That makes for a poor type of learning environment, and we'll actually start to see things about that coming up in a bit as well. Um, so I'm not saying you're going to meet, and again, this I hope this was a fairly young teacher.
No, I'm a mature person.
No, when I say young, I mean young in terms of how long they've been teaching, kind of thing.
I can't say I met the individual there at Custard. I'm in Custard like 6 years now, and I met them there. So, and
All right.
from the first day you reach there, you hear about that individual. Everybody, that's the negative thing. That yes, they warn you. Everybody tells you. Yes, it's like that.
That's bad.
It's really
That's
bad.
not good.
Yeah,
That's, that's not good. That
yeah.
sucks. All right, well, maybe we can have a chat about that teacher. Maybe you could be a little more honest with me in terms, because I think I know a lot of the lecturers, but maybe we could have a chat after class, not to sell them out kind of thing. All right, so let's look at this knowing, being, doing, and how it impacts upon other things, and it might fall in your garden, so to speak. People will be willing to collaborate with others who they perceive as being credible, which is those people who have the knowledge that qualifies them as being a leader, and therefore, in order to understand the individual, they have to demonstrate that they understand what they know. They have to show that they know what they're talking about. So they just can't say, okay, I'm qualified, but there's a vast difference between acquiring knowledge and demonstrating competence with that knowledge and information in terms of doing things, especially for something kind of practical. If you think about it, it takes years to develop um, the kind of critical skills. In fact, if you ever want to become a master in something, just the guideline that they have here, you have to spend roughly about 10,000 hours doing it. That's about the time frame that they talk about. And if you work that down to, you could work that down to days and years, and you could understand why. In a lot of instances, for anybody to become really good at something and really a specialist, it takes a long time to get there. Some people have good styles to begin with, but in order to really become, top of your game, it takes a while to get there. The recommended time frame is 10,000 hours of practice. Interesting. All right. So there are four particular skills that the leadership needs to, or leaders need to have: interpersonal skills, conceptual skills, technical skills, and tactical skills. So the interpersonal skills, they refer to it as your ability to communicate both in oral and nonverbal methodologies, creative thinking, being able to think and create ideas and be creative and innovative in your thinking processes, have expertise in this particular skills that you have at hand. So this is one of the things that a lot of teachers suffer from, and that is they're highly qualified and have technical skills, but the conceptualization skills of teaching becomes a problem. And part of that has to do with their achievement of tactical skills as well. So I can make this connection with you in terms of this. I've had or come across teachers in my experience who are very technical. They know their stuff, but they have very poor communication skills, and therefore they are unable to communicate effectively between themselves and students. Another problem that comes up is teachers who may have good communication skills, good tactical skills, have poor conceptualization skills because they're unable to design um, lesson plans that will help to create an environment of creativity, because they kind of got stuck in the methodologies that they would have encountered before. So that's a problem that a lot of teachers, new teachers in particular, because new teachers teach the way they were taught. If any of you all have ever come across a situation where you're trying to impart some knowledge to people, new knowledge to people in an organization, you will come across that situation. You will tend to mirror the types of techniques and skills um, and methodologies as a teacher that you experienced as a student. And anybody here in a kind of teaching mood or background, just to see the connectivity here? Similarly, if you are in a leadership position, you're going to do the same thing. You are going to lead the way you were led in the past. So if you were led by somebody who's highly military in nature, rule of command is going to be important, then that's the nature and the way in which you're going to go about doing or acting in terms of those leadership activities. So um, the thing about it is that we have to come to any sort of position and understand that we don't know everything and that we are going to learn new techniques. That's why that knowing, being, doing is a circular thing, because every time you do something, you learn more, you appreciate other people more, and you change your practice in terms of how you go about achieving things. Because again, it's not a one and done deal. It's a never ending process of change, reflection, and improvement, and that and seeing how things work out. So you might start off having ineffective communication or maybe poor tactical skills, but you can develop those skills along the way. I mean, and that's the nature of this thing. It's developmental. It's not something that we expect that you would have at your fingertips. This is something a lot of people expect leaders to have. They come into an organization or they come into a circumstance where they already have all these skills sitting there waiting. But when you leave school, for example, the biggest skill that you're probably going to have is technical skills. You may not necessarily have developed the interpersonal, conceptual, and tactical skills, especially if you come from a very we always have this problem with science-based students who have serious communication issues with with students. Is that the nature, Janet, of the person that you may have come across? Highly
Uh,
technical person, but they
no.
just
So the individual kind of old school and just
well,
set
that's
in
what I
their
mean,
ways.
right? Okay, but understand that speaks to being technically proficient, but being unwilling to adapt their communication styles, their conceptualization skills of how to teach, and their tactical skills of negotiation and compromise and creating that type of cohesion. So technically they're really good, but and we've had
Yeah,
that before. I
because
mean, and
we
as
did have a little war of words in my first encounter with her.
uh-huh.
Well, yes, it's a her, it's a she.
Yeah, yeah.
Finally, I
And
said
I
it.
expected that
And
they would.
eventually, the individual told me, "Well, speak for yourself," because I was speaking on behalf of the class, and she said,
Uh-huh.
"Speak for yourself." So yes, so I told her, I said, "I am speaking for me. You know,
Right.
you have you need to do so and so in order for us to learn. And if you're not giving us what the proper material in the right way, some of us would not learn." And actually, she did listen and she started to do it. Yeah.
Well, maybe it was a good thing that you stuck with her, because if she was somebody who was willing, because age has nothing to do with the malleability of your mind. Huh? You could always reset your neural pathways. Um, it might have been a good thing for her to experience you in her class, because it would have forced her to start to think about her methodologies and start to develop other things. And generally, when the college starts to receive, and this is something that I blame students for a little bit. You all know those assessments that we ask you all to do at the end of a semester about evaluating teachers.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we get very low completion rates of those things, and it generally indicates to us if there are these types of problems with a lecturer. Um, we never know who does it, and this is one of the things that people are afraid of. They are afraid that you all will be we will be able to tell who said what, and the lecturer will be aware of who said what and that kind of stuff. But that's not the case. It comes in and it generates a very it's actually mathematically based in terms of the way the data is collected, correlated. The comments that people make are taken and compiled, and they look at the nature of it, and the heads of department use the information to help guide training for the individual, especially if we start to see a lack in particular areas of their competencies, to help them sort of think a little bit differently, think about teaching differently. Because again, technically people are trained in other expertise, but what they may lack in the technical is in the being and doing parts of it, the practice of teaching. And that's the part that we can do something as an institution. But a lot of students are fearful of doing those evaluations, and it creates a disconnect because we can't work on lecturers and help them become better lecturers, because we just can't throw at people away, because you understand that some people with various types of qualifications are relatively difficult to get a hold of. So we have to be careful of dumping people, especially in your area of environmental sciences. And not a lot of people initially trained in that area. Although you all hit the saturation point pretty quickly in that area. Do you find that, Janet?
Yes, yes, sir, it is it's saturated. It is.
Yeah. I saw a hand
Yeah.
go up. Somebody wanted to ask something.
Oh yeah, sure. Well,
Yes.
to be honest, I'm not gonna lie, last semester I forgot to fill out the thing as well. Stuff was kind of busy on mine and I genuinely forgot. But a part of me thought that the lecturers would somehow see, although you all are saying how you all don't see the responses and stuff, so a part of me thought that because it had a time I joined a course, and for the first class, I think two people joined or something like that, and the lecturer was like, "Oh, y'all two are the ones that called me out last time for something," and I thought like, maybe the
It
person
was based
saw
on
the
that.
once or something, and so I kind of was like,
No, that was very unprofessional of the teacher in any case. It might have been that they may have had a specific issue and went to see the head of the department about them, or message the head of the department about the behavior of the individual. Um, we've had to, in the past, fire lecturers or dismiss lecturers from the college for some serious issues. Um, and that's actually something that when a lecturer singles out people and starts to make statements like that, it shows a level of unprofessionalism. Um, because if there was an issue, it's something that they had to work on. But then again, human nature is something that we try to protect ourselves and do things kind of stupidly sometimes. But you're right about that. When lecturers start to make those kind of statements, it does not encourage people to want to say, "I'm having a problem with this lecturer, and I'll do the evaluation sheets for them," that kind of stuff. Because even as a good lecturer, you get to understand what you're doing right as opposed to things you could improve. Huh? So that's something that you have to pay attention to as well. So you make adjustments to your techniques and methodologies. All right. Okay. All right. So the being means knowing what values and attributes define you as a leader. So here we're talking about character and character development. You have to assess yourself in terms of knowing your principles and values. So this is where we start to talk about the importance of ethical values in the process of becoming good leaders, because you don't, well, you might be given a leadership position, but you're not looked upon as a leader by people in your under your influence if you don't start to exhibit good characteristics. And as part of those good characteristics would be based upon, in large, what you value as being the most important things. Now, um, and it varies from organization to organization, but obviously it also varies from person to person in terms of how they go about looking at things and working on things. So you have to, as a particular individual, get to understand who you are and how you relate and behave with other people. All right. So see this statement here: character gives you courage to do what is right regardless of the circumstances or consequences. That's a really powerful behavior that they're talking about here. Because in our environment today, there are few people who actually act on their principles, and that because they go along with the, especially if it's something that's unpopular, they go along with either the crowd or they go along with the individuals around them who are, um, who might be negative towards them and that type of stuff. So this kind of crowd pleaser, everything to everyone kind of situation is a kind of challenge, not a kind of challenge, but a serious challenge that we have to deal with. Whereas like Janet said, regardless of what the teacher was doing, she was staying in class, and because they wanted to, kind of get through the program and get done with it. That's the kind of where you disregard any sort of negativity and try to look at the positive elements. That shows a particular type of principle that guides Janet's behavior. The other students, there was nothing wrong with what they did in terms of leaving the class, and because we've had situations like that where once the students recognize who the teacher is, especially in the online environment, they look quickly to find another class to jump to if it's something they could avoid or somebody they could avoid, because they just simply don't want the hassle of dealing with that individual. Janet, on the other hand, had a different approach that stick it out and go with it. Character, interesting. Being means acting, knowing, doing, and that type of stuff. So what you want to do is in your doing, you have to, in your practice, basically, you're trying to develop the outcomes that you want to get. So therefore, you have to be looking at how your principles impact upon your practice. So if your practice is one where you see it as something that is selfish for yourself, in terms of all you're really doing this for is to get paid at the end of the day, then that is going to affect your practice, because you're not going to be willing to put out the extra mile for any student. You're not going to be willing to do anything to help them deal with their own personal challenges. You're just going to do what the job requires, and that's it. When the end of the day comes, that's it. You pack up and you leave. How many of you all work with individuals like that in leadership positions? You get this kind of behavior in particular in public sector workers, where from top down, everybody's, when the job done, pack your bag and leave everything behind. No care about what you're doing, how you're doing it, how it impacts upon other people. That type of mentality leads to a very poor type of organizational behavior and organizational um, attitudes and culture. And it's an unfortunate thing. We could look at a lot of negatives, seeing bad impacts or bad examples of these things. It's very difficult sometimes to find good examples of where you're seeing this actually taking place. So I'm going to find that I'm going to use a lot of teaching examples to speak about this, but there are also some leadership examples that we could possibly look at in terms of smaller environments where the impact might not be as broadly felt in society. And you might find them, for example, in your church groups or activities, any sort of cultural organizations you might be in, or social community activities. You might find examples of that within your own lifespan, even within your own family. You might be able to find this. But in terms of general examples of people who behave in a particular way and following this type of leadership model, it might be a little challenging to find. All right. Okay, so it says that character knowledge is not enough in facilitating change in the leadership process. The doing element is the area in which we start to actually do things, and when we do it right, we will do it, and we should reflect upon it, try to make sure we repeat those type of results over and over again. So the doing is the part that actually gets the things done. So where we see people put things into practice, and if we are able to accomplish the vision and mission of the organization, and in fact create that change that people are talking about from any sort of organization. So Now, Janet, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Do you belong to any sort of social environmental groups like beach cleanup committees and that type of stuff?
Not at the moment, sir.
But did you
That my life
participate?
has changed.
All right. So
I don't have time for anything.
yeah, I kind of figured life has gotten thick. But at any point in time, did you ever take part in things like nature seekers, that type of stuff?
No, I was mostly involved in church activities.
All right.
Church.
Okay. All right. So one of the areas in terms of in which they try to encourage environmental students to get involved is in environmental organizations. Because it brings to bear some of the environmental concerns that we talk about. So, for example, I know I used to take students to nature seekers and turtle watchers. Anybody here ever went turtle watching in Matura?
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to get prepared for that. Because the turtle season required beach cleanup activities, monitoring things, sometimes intervention based upon poachers and hunters getting involved um, with the areas. So those are things that that you could get involved with, and you could actually see the practice and the character and that type of activity taking place there. This is where, you know, your technical skills are leading you into activities where you're going to start putting your technical, the knowing element into your practice and developing meaning and care about what you're doing. Getting involved. I remember a lot of students from different programs started to get involved, and they never really saw it from the environmental impact that what we do at a beachside has such negative impact upon the wildlife that facilitates or works in that area as well. So something that we think about in terms of the level of or the impact of our activities on the behavior of students or the behavior of animals in the area. So something to think about. All right. Sometimes leaders fail to act because of indecision or fixation on perfection. Now, I have worked in organizations with this, and it is annoying um, because your organization cannot get anything done if you're waiting on the perfect lineup of all resources to be able to get something done. In a lot of instances, especially in the real world, you're not going to get everything put in place to be able to get things done. Leaders who have this requirement to get all the ducks in order before they begin to execute anything end up with a lot of up and down but no forward movement, and that is it has a negative impact upon your followers because they're not seeing any kind of organizational movement, change, or achievement taking place because we just seem to be waiting and waiting. And well, we didn't get the money this time, so we'll have to wait until we get. While everybody else is moving around us, we seem to be stagnating, and that is a very pessimistic way to run an organization. That we can't afford any what they call zero defects kind of attitude or no mistakes. It's also saying don't take any chances. So if you don't take a chance, what is it? If you don't take the risk, you're not going to achieve anything, and that could be extremely stunting for any organization to come across leaders who have that type of fixation. I don't know if any of you all have ever had that. If you yourself fall into the category of always needing everything to be perfect before you do anything else, check yourself. I don't want you to sell yourself out, but at the same time, you will know yourself, hopefully, and understand that that can be one of the most paralyzing type of attitudes that you can end up having as a leader or even as a follower, but also in terms of leading your own life. If you're waiting for perfection, you're not going to get things done, anything done. because you'll never find the perfect time frame for everything. All right, now part of the process of a leader is learning and understanding that um, learning is a very important part of your leading process. It means that you have to, one, accept that you don't know everything. Two, that others can bring value into your own knowledge sphere. And three, that you have to encourage that learning with other people. And leaders promote learning by either through their own learning, which is, like one of the most powerful things you can do as a parent is to engage in learning activities with your children. Because if they see you going through the nitty gritty of studying and taking notes and that kind of stuff, it's a powerful way to illustrate the need for continuous learning. Um, Helping others to learn, that's another very important thing as a leader and as a parent you can do with your children, helping them learn work that or skills that you have acquired over the years, but you're going to go through the process of trying to help them to become it. So as a leader, you're helping others learn more about their skills, about communication, about any aspect of leadership or any aspect of the thing by shaping and contributing a culture that promotes learning. This is especially within an organization. If you, as a leader, don't help to contribute to a learning environment, it kind of cuts it off. So, and that creates a void in the organization because the organization is not going to be open to promoting learning. And one of the things you could see happening with that is, the leader encouraging the setup of various training programs of uh, allowing time off for workers to go and learn and that type of activity. Far too often in our culture here, employers look at students at their employees, I should say. Let's think from this perspective. Far too often, they look upon any employee trying to better themselves through some sort of formal learning environment as a threat to their access to you as a resource. Now, I don't know how many of you all have engaged in this or felt this. So some of you all might have personal experience with when you're trying to get time off, for example, to study for exams and that type of stuff, or the fact that you are studying is something that you keep very private because you know it negatively would impact upon you in the workplace. Is that any of you all have stories to tell of that? Because I have a lot of students who have come across with that type of response. Anybody?
I do. Me, I do.
Who's me? Stanisha.
Tunisia.
Okay.
The
All right.
first time I started Custard, my boss, she said, even though we had like enough staff and everything to facilitate the schooling and whatever, she was like, no, we won't be able to facilitate you. So, she didn't keep me and anything. She didn't keep me.
What type of organization was that?
It's a food business. It was yeah. It was
Yeah.
just like 2 days during the week, early in the morning.
Yeah.
And I started to work at
That's pretty. You're doing food prep and that type of stuff then.
At that time, I wasn't really doing food prep, but more like doing things on the spot.
Okay, I
but
see.
it had enough staff where it was just like 2 hours in the morning. I was missing out from work and I was willing to take it. We like work up an extra hour or something, or take it from a lunch or something like that. Yeah, but she didn't want to hear that. It was like, nah, you had to go. I was like, all right, no problem. And I just left.
Yeah, and it's because the time that she would have sacrificed for you meant that you were going to improve yourself. And the belief that a lot of employers have is that if you improve yourself, then you're going to leave the job and they're going to lose. Which in effect, that's what she did. She made it so what's the word I want to say? Unfavorable for you. You just left the job, didn't you? Right, Tanisha?
She sure did.
See, like you're eating there right now.
So, but some of those bosses or managers, they it's just about they don't want to see you elevate yourself.
Correct. Yes,
Because
and
I
that.
had an issue with that when I started my course as well. And
Uh,
the head of my department we didn't want to give me time off, but she's not the owner of the institution, so I went above her. I went all the way to the
fortunately,
training committee and got
right.
my time out. You know,
Yeah.
it's wrong. They don't want to see you elevate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they feel threatened by you. You see, by anybody in an organization who improving themselves. Um, and interestingly enough, if you're working, you're also legally provided relief for that, huh? In terms of time off for exams and study time and that type of stuff.
Yes,
Through
it's a fact.
Yeah, through
Yeah.
the not OSHA, but through the Industrial Relations Act, you actually
Yes,
have legal time frame for those things.
because I went all the way up to the
Industrial
trainings
court,
committee and stuff, and I was granted because I was legible for it.
right? And your boss was taking a very myopic view of how you were. Um, they might have put the argument, well, if I give up time for her, everybody is going to want it, kind of nonsense, right?
So
That
it's
was
just not me alone. As anybody who tries to to go back to school and work
no,
in
that's
the
what I'm
first
saying.
place. So,
They
so that person
create
have
that.
a serious issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what type of work environment it is? You don't have to tell us where, but what type of environment?
Medical
No, but is
in the
it public
hospital,
sector? Public
public.
sector?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Public sector has that because you might remember a lot of people in the public sector arrive in their position simply by sitting at a job for a length of time, not necessarily by actually doing anything to be qualified, but just being in a job for a length of period.
So
Sit-
hands up. I agree with you 100% on that one.
So anybody who's seeking additional qualifications is seen as a threat, and therefore they are looked upon as I need to keep this person down. So that's why you find in the public sector, learning environments seldom exist because the leaders there and the managers there don't encourage that. They don't encourage people to, move beyond the realms of this particular, type of job that you have. Because if you think about it, a lot of clerical positions are supposed to be just starter jobs for people. You're supposed to come and go. You're supposed to spend your entire life in a clerical office doing the same thing over and over again. All right. Okay. So let's go into the purpose. Relational leadership is purposeful. So being purposeful is going to be a very kind of cornerstone of the focal point of what leadership is going to be. It means identifying goals and objectives and working towards getting that change done with other people. Now, it means that for the leader, in order to achieve the goals and objectives, they're going to have to work with the other people. So here they talk about resolving differences among participants, finding common direction, building shared vision, improving the organization to allow for that sort of change to take place, and enhancing other people so that you know, they can become skilled with the tools necessary to achieve the goals and changes that they're talking about. So that is going to be a very important element for you as a leader to be able to get people to want to be able to change and become the change that they want to be, or the change that they see themselves being. And that brings us to two types of vision activities that they speak to: the personalized vision and the socialized vision. So when we talk about the personalized vision, this is usually the vision that an individual brings to an organization. So remember we talked about organizations being, in earlier on we talked about whether or not they are individually driven or if they are vision driven or personality driven versus This is one of the issues that comes up when you have organizations that arise out of somebody's personal vision of where they see themselves going. Because other individuals in the organization may not have any sort of input into that vision that you as the leader come with. And that means you're going to have to impose upon others your view of how you want things done. Now, whether or not you get people to share that vision is going to be problematic because again, they have no input in what is happening. A better way to try and get organizations moving forward is to build what is called socialized vision or vision from everybody. So it means that you collectively get people together and generate an idea or vision of something, a future that you have that everybody can support. Now, if you think about like nature seekers and all those people, they have utilized this methodology of socialized vision. Even Costat, we used the vision and mission statements that you see the organization espousing in its documentation. And those were visions and mission statements that were derived from a socialized approach to um, arriving and building the vision and mission statement with the input from other people. Now, once that was set up, and it goes through revision time and time again, we have to include the new people who join an organization. So when you have a vision and mission that's set up, like in our case, that was 23 years ago, we set up a vision and mission statement. Um, how do you go about ensuring that that vision and mission statement is has continuity when you have new staff coming in as old staff moves off? You have to go through a process of socializing that vision with the people in the organization again. So when new people come in, they may make some improvements, but they also have to get buy-in from the individuals that come into the organization. And that is always going to be a big challenge because when you come in, you have you have other people's views that you have to try and link their views into what the view of the organization is. So there's a section here um, that speaks to that, where it links to change processes. Um, okay, I think it's back here somewhere. Where you have to, from time to time, engage in vision and missions activities to try to make sure that new people coming into the organization don't feel as if they've just been handed something. Now that's a problem that a lot of older organizations suffer from, because when they recruit others, here it is, we have to make sure that when we recruit new people into the organization, we have to get a shared vision for them. Now, you also have you have the opposite. You have organizations that never had vision and mission statements. So like, say for instance, in the public sector. And in the public sector now, you're trying to tell people, well, we need to create a vision and mission statement for your department. So now it's a situation of how do you go about creating a vision, a mission, and statement for your department, but your department is already working. And what ends up happening is that you have to go through the rounds of motivating people to try and take part in this activity of developing vision and mission statements for the activities that we do. So for example, I can ask you to create your own personal and personal vision and mission statements for yourself. So where do you see yourself in the future? That's your vision, right? What dreams you have for the future. And your mission statement is, how do you expect to achieve those things? What would be the things that you're going to be doing to maintain those things? The mission that you're going to be going on to achieve your vision. So for those of you who are going to be dealing with this, vision and mission is going to be another chapter that is going to be dealt with in more detail by one of the groups in class. So if I ask you to do that in the context of what you're doing now, you can start to see that it can be problematic because you probably already have some idea of what you see yourself doing in the future. And you are already employing various techniques and methodologies to try and achieve that vision because you have certain number of things that you want to do. So those are the kind of things that you could look at. So when you have, as I said, there are two elements. When you have a new organization starting up and you're bringing people into it, you have to try and get them to create a unified or communal vision for where the organization is moving forward. That's relatively easier than having an existing organization that never did a vision and mission exercise to actually do that type of activity now. Most modern organizations start from that perspective always. But we've had older organizations that had to kind of come into the mix from that. And unfortunately, a lot of times it comes as a top-down decision-making process that tends to lead to some degree of alienation by the rank and file of the organization, and therefore does not get the level of buy-in that that you would expect to have for the organization or you would like to have in your organization, because people don't really feel committed for that to that vision and mission. They just see it as, this is my job, I'm just doing it and just getting out of here. So all these concepts of vision animates and inspirates and transforms purpose into action will work when you have relatively new organizations that go through the vision and mission creation process that is inclusive in nature. So you have a group of people getting together, and beginning a new sort of enterprise or organization, or even just a different thing. It's a longer, more difficult process if you take an existing organization and begin that process of animating towards a new vision and mission statement, or just even reclassifying what they do in the concept or context of vision and mission thing. I don't know if any of you all have ever gone through that exercise in the organizations that you've worked with, but I know when I first joined the Ministry of Education, there wasn't anything like vision and mission statements for the ministry. But later on, a vision and mission statement suddenly appeared, and it was top down. It came from the office of the minister, and then it became the vision and mission statement of all officers of the ministry. And it was kind of like, well, how did we arrive at that? Whereas when I got engaged with COSTAT, we were part and parcel of the process of writing and creating the vision and mission statement. Went through the exercises and to understand what we were trying to do and why we were trying to do it. So those are the kind of things that we were paying attention to, and ensuring that we had some sort of involvement. And it feels important, because when you are part of that process, you actually feel, hey, this is my organization, and you have a healthy sense of commitment to the organization, and you're willing to give the organization more of your time, more of your effort, more of your commitment to achieving those goals and objectives, as opposed to an organization that you hop into. There's no sort of indoctrination into the vision and mission of the organization, and you're just there as a cog in the wheel, and you're just acting based upon that. All right. So part of when you join an organization, there has to be this movement or activity by the organization to initiate you into the vision and mission statements and the organizational purpose. You're not just there to draw along a paycheck. You're part of some sort of organizational movement towards some sort of change. If effective organizations have a way of being able to do that with some degree of success, and that way they can get more out of you and more commitment from you in terms of the way the organization is going. So one of the ways to get that done is by claiming that what we're doing is going to be for some positive change. One common goal that people pull together for is some sort of positive change. And this has to be real in the sense that you join a group for the first time because you look at what the group is trying to do. So if you have, like, as I said, if Janet has this background in environmental management, environmental sciences, then getting involved with a nature group or some environmentally conscious group is one of those things where there's a correlation between what you do and what you would like to see. Now, you might have other people who are participants in that type of activity because they have a natural affinity to nature. So it means that there's a connection that is created, but we all see that connection as being something positive. So when organizations and leaders recognize the need to couch what they're doing in some form of positive change, that we are doing things to improve the conditions that exist around us, and we don't want to hurt, we want to be socially responsible to the organizations, to the world around us, then we get a feeling of noble contribution to the activity that we're engaging in, the change that we're engaging in. And that's one of the methodologies that we want to be employing here with the leadership program, that you need to be looking at the organizations that you're leading as one that is going to be an agent for positive change, not just change in the sense of change for change's sake, but because you're accomplishing this change for some sort of positive growth beyond just profits, beyond just your own achievements, but something that is going to be impactful for the entire society, for the community that you're involved with, and it is important for us to all want to contribute to that change. If we get that type of feeling going, then there's a great likelihood that we'll achieve those things, as opposed to not, you know, not getting it. So the process of change talks about here, how do we take an organization that has a particular mindset and change it. So they talk about this cycle here of unfreeze, change, then refreeze. So most organizations, they have a situation where they are in some frozen structure. So the analogy here is like ice, basically. So what causes the unfreezing is some trigger event. So let's look at the organization Costat, which we all share a commonality with. The trigger event was the lockdown situations that we found ourselves getting into. That led to a massive and quick change from face-to-face classes to online class situation. That's the trigger event. Now, the problem is, now that we've pivoted into that online environment, do we stay focused on that, or do we try to, nail down that and then freeze it back? That's the next question. The the intention is to leave the organization in a more malleable circumstance than when you first acted on it. All right. And the reason for that has to be that change is probably the most consistent thing in life. Things always change, and it's therefore necessary for us to have to be able to engage in change management all the time. So rather than freezing back once the change has been achieved, the idea is to become slushy, not to refreeze, but to be more slushy. So it means that we have to be, as an organization, I cost that, be flexible enough to move back into face-to-face, as well as expand our online environments, which is something that we have to address, because a lot of things have changed for the good and for the bad, and therefore we have to be regularly evaluating what we're doing to ensure that we are doing the best thing that we can do given the circumstances that we face. So like this Saturday, for instance, is one of the first live graduation exercises that we're going to engage in after how many years of not doing any sort of physical graduation exercises. And there are lots of challenges with going back into that. I mean, I know for a lot of students it's going to be great because the online graduations were just so I don't know what the word was. They were kind of surreal. It didn't feel like you graduated, but you graduated kind of thing. You were just looking at yourself online, pictures of yourself. There wasn't this pomp and circumstance that's associated with the whole process of graduation. So we're going to see what it looks like on Saturday. I'm supposed to be marshalling students again, so looking forward to it. But I'm kind of dreading it a little bit too because I'm gonna have to mask up and whatnot because I have some comorbidities that I have to look out for. All right. So different models going to be looking at how you go about dealing with change and moving from one type of situation to another. There is a chapter, in fact, the last chapter that's going to be presented by students here is a chapter on leading change and how you go about. So they talk about change being time consuming, um, and you have to find a balance between going too fast or going too slow. So you have to be careful with the rate at which you're doing changes, and making sure that you tackle things from the position where you're ensuring that the change is taking place in the right process and the right pace, because you could lose momentum in a change in environment. So that's something that you would have to pay attention to. And of course, you have to connect those changes with the vision treatment that you're working on, because change can't be just for change's sake. You have to change in the context of that vision that you've created for the future. So though we have gone from full face to face to online classes,